The Joyful Friar podcast is made possible by the generous support of our friends. To support the podcast, please visit nathan-castle.com and donate today.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the Joyful Friar podcast. I am Father Nathan, your host. This episode is part two of a trilogy. The story that we're dealing with is Lupe, who is a college student, a PhD candidate, who took her own life after being discovered in some academic dishonesty that she felt would ruin the rest of her life. I have a heart for college students because I've been a campus minister for 25 years. I'm living in residence with the fellow Dominicans that are doing that work still on the University of Arizona campus in Tucson. In fact, tonight I'll be saying Mass for the students. So while I'm not doing that in full-time employment any longer, I'm still around the edges of it because I love the college environment and I love college students. So when this story came to me in a dream, and I realized this was a college student who took her own life, of course it affected my heart, and it still does, even though I know things have worked out well for her in her ongoing life. Still, it made me wish I could reach every student who felt that something had happened that ruined everything, and that does happen. In Lupe's case, if you go back and listen to the previous episode, you'll find that she was conceived by an Anglo, a Caucasian man and Latina woman. They never married, and she never really knew her father. She met him, but there was no warm relationship there. However, from early on in her life, she was an excellent student. She was the kind of student that got written up in local newspaper articles for winning some sort of prize or somehow being a standout. And she got used to that. She got used to academic attention, notice, awards. And when it came time to apply for colleges, she pretty much had her pick of them. She told me in a dream that she turned down Stanford. Well, they only accept about 4% of their applicants each year. And she was in a pool of people that were so sought after that not only did Stanford want her, but so did many other places. She didn't tell us where she eventually went. That really wasn't that pertinent. But she has a little sense of humor too, and she wanted me to know because I was at Stanford for 7 years that she was good enough to be at Stanford and passed on it, went somewhere else. Again, if you go back to that episode, you'll learn that she was a PhD candidate very far along in the process. She was in some kind of laboratory science field. She had created a thesis project that's usually about causality, uh, positing that this thing could, or this cluster of ideas uh, could be found to be the cause of an illness or something causal. This causes that. And that's the way the scientific method moves forward. Think maybe I'd like somebody to cure Alzheimer's. Well, people are working on that, but they posit what's going on here and why does this happen? Anyway, she was in some sort of laboratory field where she was positing the possibility that this agent could have this causal effect. You might spend 2 or 3 years working that process and finding at the end of the process that your thesis was disproven. No, in fact, this does not cause that. Well, that adds to the body of scientific truth, but she was saying it's not nearly as satisfying as is finding something causal. And in fact, it wasn't just satisfying or praiseworthy to find something, a thesis that was proven correct, but it was also helpful in getting the next level of funding that you might for a next project. Funders weren't so much interested in funding research from a researcher whose previous project was proven false. And so she felt there was some fudge facts or even introduce falsehood into the system. Well, of course, that's wrong, telling a lie, but it's not just about one's own personhood and one's own career. Others rely on the information you put into the system as being what you said it was. And so other researchers could come along and be misled by the false information that she put into the system, and it ruins things for lots of people. Well, she got discovered, and she told us that in a dream, and her she felt that all the success that she had built until that point in her life, she didn't give us her age, but it might have been mid 20s to late 20s, was ruined. She would probably lose her position at the university. She'd lose funding. She'd lose her on-campus housing. Her resume from now on would have to include the fact that she had falsified findings during her pursuit of a PhD. All of it was negative, even the part about being thought to be that hometown girl made good, that all that admiration that she'd basked in for her life would now be tainted by this news. She just didn't see a way forward, and she decided to end her life with sleeping pills. She told us that, well, I tried to end it, and I did, um, kind of, except I woke up because we're eternal. She wasn't a religious person, but she awoke into an afterlife where she was well cared for and surrounded by a team of people that wanted to help her move from that circumstance to something better. I love that about this work, and I believe it's consistent with what I've always been taught about God and Jesus and the Catholic understanding of the world. We're 1.4 billion out of 8. So I don't believe we've cornered the market on all truth or anything like it. But I do believe that that the Creator who brought us all into existence out of love doesn't quit loving us even if we take our life. There's still more life to be had, and uh, Lupe found that out. Well, one of the things that was her struggle was she felt the need to shine. She felt the need to have the attention and admiration of other people. And she had it for most of her life, which is why that became such a thing. But what she didn't have was a sense of her own worth and value apart from her skills and what she could do in a classroom. She somehow conflated the idea of her academic accomplishments and successes with her own essential self-worth. That's tempting. I know because I did that as a young guy in elementary school and high school and the first part of college. That's pretty much the way I lived. I got attention by good grades and academic rewards and all that. Um, I That's a story for another day, but I had a college professor who challenged me and sent me in a new direction uh, about that kind of thing and calming down about uh, receiving notice from other people, just being yourself. Well, that has happened for her, but only after her death. She said, I understand now that I shine because I'm made of goodness, that um, that I shine and so does everyone else because we are each beautiful. We all have our own goodness, and we don't need to accomplish things in order to shine. She was getting some help in the afterlife from other college students who had taken their lives, who were further along a healing journey than she was. And part of them, they were, they had the credibility to be able to say to her, "Look, we've rebounded from our own uh, time of suicide. You can too." Well, I wanted to hone in today on in this compassionate response episode on ideas that are important to me that have to do with words. I'm going to talk a little bit about competition and rivalry. Next time, the next episode will be about spiritual practice. So we'll go more into uh, religious and spiritual ideation and prayer around these topics. But for right now, I'd like to just do some etymology and tell you a little bit about how I came to this. I had been in campus ministry at the University of Arizona for a year, 4 years at the University of California, Riverside, and 12 years at Arizona State University. The two Arizona universities in the state constitution, there's a kind of an egalitarian spirit built into the founding documents of these two large Arizona universities. The idea was it ought to be free for anybody to at least try. So the admission standards are relatively low. You ought to have a chance to come, and if you fail out, well, that's on you. So these two universities didn't have, a great big barrier to getting in. The University of California system is intended to be for the top 10% of California high school graduates. That's the way it was designed. There's another system, the Cal State system, that's a little more egalitarian than that. And then the community college system is another rung of all of that. So UC Riverside also had a lot of talented students, but nothing had quite prepared me for what I would encounter at Stanford. I thought of Stanford as a very wealthy school and kind of an elite, like a West Coast Ivy. Sometimes it was called the Harvard of the West. Well, I knew that it was very academically well regarded. I didn't really appreciate just how difficult it was to get in until I was actually there. And I started hearing these statistics that only about 4% of applicants get in at all. So they're all valedictorians. They all play the oboe. They have these impressive resumes of service and all kind of things that they've done, even though they're only 18 years old. And so they arrive in a milieu unlike any they've really been in before. They're not going to stand out here in the way they did in elementary school or in high school, at least for the most part. They know that they're coming into a rarefied atmosphere with other very talented students. Well, what I began to hear them talking about, especially the undergraduates, was how competitive it was. I heard that word all the time, and usually in a context that made uh, competition feel like a negative, or at least something that was strenuous and stressful. I heard the word stress a lot too. And I thought, how do I help these young people calm down? Well, one of the things I do sometimes is I go to online etymology dictionary, my favorite online tool app, and I typed in competition. I knew that co and com has to do with being with, they're together. But patere means to strive. That's all it means, to strive. So to be a person who competes is one who strives with others who strive. There's nothing in that definition that presumes negativity or stress. It just means that sometimes people who want to strive in some human endeavor like to do that with other people who also want to strive doing the same thing. Think of, especially athletes. I'm a golfer. Nobody that wants to have a great golf game wants to play with me. I'm a casual enthusiast of the game. I don't practice. I don't want to. I just want to go out and have some fun from time to time. And I can watch a golf video or get some little bit of instruction, but I'm not pouring a lot of effort into that. I don't want to. Um, I don't feel I need to compete in that realm, especially now I'm 69 years old. I don't need to do that. But sometimes people want to work out with other people if they're doing strength training. Marathon runners want to train with other people. When they do that, they're choosing to compete. It doesn't mean they want to conquer, they want to uh, outlast or supersede, um, prove they're better than their competitors. The word just means they want to be with people who strive. Got it? What's the matter with that? So when I learned that, I started trying to coach my Stanford students and say, you came here because you wanted to be in the company of other people who are academic strivers. So calm down, just strive. And if you fail, so what? The unusual thing was I was meeting there with 18, 19, 20-year-olds who had never failed at anything, never gotten turned down for anything they applied for. And I found that part of the work of a campus minister on that campus was to accompany young people through their first experience of failure and to help them um, in their sadness or confusion or whatever that accompanied failing at something, and then be there to encourage them to get up and try again or uh, just take it as a life lesson. Now you know what it feels like to fail. The next time you fail at something, you'll know that you'll survive. You'll go on to other things. So competition, compete to strive with. The thing that my students were really talking about in that negative way wasn't so much competition as it was rivalry. I looked up rival, and that derives from the word river. A rival looks at a river, presumes that it should belong only to them and to no one else, that the whole thing should flow down their throat, and if anyone else drinks from it, they are diminished. And that person who drinks from your river is now your opponent, your enemy, someone who has taken away from you something that was rightfully yours. It's oppositional. It's not um, working alongside someone as a competitor so that we both might be better by the end of our competition. We might be more skilled. The rival just assumes at the outset that I must get this resource and take it only for myself and deny it to anyone else. Well, there are some ways in which being a college student at that really high academic level can point people in the direction of being rivals. One of the ways that that happens practically is in high level admission to professional schools, medical school, for example. We need more doctors, but we have a system that limits the number of people who can even get into medical school. And it reminded me of that um, game of musical chairs that you might have played as a little kid. When I was little, it would have been a record on a turntable with a tone arm, and you'd go around in circles listening to the music, and there'd be one too few chairs for the number of people in the circle. And when the music stopped, everybody had to grab a seat as quick as they could, and one person would be left out, and that person has to go away. They're out of the game. Well, and get admission to a lot of high level uh, professional programs, it's like that. There's only so many chairs, and there's lots of people that want to sit in one of them, that want to get to be in that medical school or whatever it is. And people really did feel like they needed to beat out every other candidate, that everyone else was my rival. Well, it's not the only way to approach that. You could just do your best all the time and hope for the best and then take what comes. If you didn't get into the school of your choice, maybe you go to a school that was second or third or somewhere else on your list, or maybe you need to do some career counseling around if I don't get to be the medical doctor that I aspired to be, are there other opportunities in the healing professions that might suit me that I can pursue? I counsel people in that way to not kind of put all their eggs in one basket and feel like they're a total failure if they didn't get the one thing they set their heart on. So, rivalry. It's one thing when you have like at Stanford, we had student athletes in the athletic department, and our main rival was Cal, University of California at Berkeley. And there, when in the campus bookstore, there was there were shirts that one T-shirts that one could buy that says Cal sucks. Well, you were supposed to somehow, as welcome to Stanford, here's whom you're supposed to hate because they're our rival. Well, that can be playful within bounds of courtesy to enjoy having a rivalry with another school and its teams and so on. But then that, of course, can be overdone into something that's unwholesome. Anyway, I try to call out when I hear the word competition. It almost always really means rivalry, where I think that I must defeat everyone else in order to win at the cost of the other. It's just not the way I think the universe is built. God is loving all of us. There's enough of everything to go around. Um, and it's true that there might be times and circumstances where we don't get our first choice at things, but there's always another possibility if we're open to it. Unfortunately, uh, Lupe, I think, fell victim to that idea that she needed to um, be more than she actually was in the eyes of other people, that she was insufficient. I want to tell you about a retreat, and when I look back, my career as a professional full-time campus minister is over, as far as I know. Um, I did that, for 25 years, and as I mentioned earlier, I still play with it around the edges. I help out where I can, but I don't know that I'll ever do that as a full-time job again. But when I look back on those 25 years, there was one thing that stood out that really gave me joy, and I still enjoy thinking about it. It was at Stanford, and my staff and I were looking at that issue of students feeling overly stressed at the competitive nature of the school and its demands. And while I was there, there was usually a suicide or two each year. It was never of anybody that I knew, but still, it's not a large university and it's largely residential. When there's a suicide on campus, the sadness and the reverberated throughout a community you felt for this person, whether you knew them or not. Anyway, we decided to do a retreat that was based around the idea of this competition and rivalry business. And we we were kind of trying to give it a title and a theme, and we came up upon the idea of ordinariness. Could you just be ordinary? And would that be a bad thing? Well, I looked up the word ordinary. You should know that about me by now. That's what I would do. And I was so surprised when I found that the word ordinary was actually a metaphor that comes from weaving. Weaving. Many abstractions, many abstract words that try to describe something like ordinariness look for something tangible as a metaphor. Well, what I found out was somewhere along the line, people took the idea of a loom and how you have to have parallel strands of yarn or string or thread weaving. If you're listening on the audio only podcast, I'm using my hands on the video to try to show things going one way and intersecting perpendicularly at another, the way a loom would be constructed. You'd have all these parallel lines of, let's say, yarn, and then they would go in and out of each other, up and down, to create a woven cloth. Well, it reminded me of when I was a little child in elementary school. There was kind of an after-school program in our town that one of the activities they gave us was these little plastic looms that were the size of a pot holder. And there were these stretchy uh, bits of some sort of elasticized cloth, and it had, I think it was 10 by 10. It had little pegs, and you would stretch bits of these elastic bands across in a row in parallel lines, and then you go in and out and in and out and in and out perpendicularly to create a pot holder. All right. Well, I thought, you know, that's weaving. And the importance, the reason that the word ordinary comes from that is you need all of those strands to be like the one next to it. You don't need extraordinary strands of yarn. You need them to be in their lane. You just need them to be as ordinary as the one next to it is, uniform. And and if each one just performs its little service, it's a part of the fabric of the finished product. And then everyone benefits because you don't burn your hands because you have a pot holder. Well, I thought we could do that on retreat. So we took those streamers that you can get at a craft store, those that are in all the different colors. Like when I was in high school, our school colors were green and white, and we always had those streamers that were, on your car, and uh, around the football and basketball games, there'd be some sort of a decoration with these streamers that came on a roll. Well, we got a bunch of those, and we decided we'd take the students on retreat. We did this exercise where we had them line up 10 in a row, opposite another 10 in a row, with 10 in a row on each side, making a square. So a total of 40 people forming a square. Then we gave each one of them one of these rolls of crepe paper, and we described the project. Now, these are Stanford people, and a bunch of them were engineers. So immediately they start strategizing about the best way to do it. And, it was quite fun to watch, really. This simple task, how to maximize it, and so on. Well, and so they got busy doing that and, going in and out and in and out, creating this crepe paper potholder thing. But they didn't know that we were going to take them away from being ordinary and pull out extraordinary people. The name of the retreat was called to be ordinary. Could you just be who you are, you ordinarily are? Well, we created what was five different characters that were uh, tongue-in-cheek, well, characters that one might find it at Stanford. And we interrupted the ordinary work with a bell and whistles and clapping uh, and calling attention to one person at the expense of the other 39, and calling them out as being so extraordinary that they couldn't be expected to do this ordinary work. And so they were pulled out and they were put up on a stage and crowned and so on. We fussed over them. For example, here's one of them. Stanford is unusual in that it has lots of student athletes who go on to the Olympics. And Stanford doesn't have an athletic dormitory. All those Olympic athletes live right with everybody else. And so your roommate or your suite mate or the person down the hall, you might see them on an Olympic telecast, but they're just people that live down the hall. Well, so you might be next door to, an Olympic gold medalist. Well, what does that do to your ego? You might not be able to, you know, walk without stumbling, and you've got somebody who's a tumbler or a gymnast or whatever. So we created this one character that we called Gymnasium. Gymnasium is the U.S. Olympic quadrupentathlete who recently took the London Olympics by storm, racking up more medals than anyone in this or any other galaxy. He set new world records in the 10-meter and shallow end individual relays. His solo synchronized swim routine reduced a worldwide audience to tears. He's the stud you'll never be. Give it up for Stanford's extraordinary golden boy, Gymnasium. And then there's, a round of applause, and we had a bunch of ridiculous medals that we put on him, and stars and stripes, and all of that. And I think we had piped in music like the Olympic theme. But he was pulled away from the project, and so the people on either side of him had to do their work and his. All right, that was only one. So we did that, but then we had oh Sometimes there was, you know, attention to body image and looking good. Especially the women are under more pressure than than a lot of guys are for that kind of thing. So we created a character called Mr. Point. Direct your gaze to the carefully sculpted lines of this megastar supermodel. Anorexia Today has called her every little girl's dream and every parent's nightmare. Though DePoint has a figure she could die for, she was recently quoted in Skin Deep, her widely read blog, as supporting ongoing mascara research on small caged animals and promoting her dream of world peace. Let's have a rousing round of applause for Stanford's own extraordinary Miss DePoint. Well, she's pulled away, and then we had, an exaggerated, I think we put some, like beauty contest banner on her or whatever we did. But she was also exalted. I think we had guys carry her like on a litter and put her up on a stage. But the people next to her, she had to leave the ordinary project, and then the people on either side of her now had to do their work in somebody else's. We did that for three more people uh, until so five people were taken out of the ordinary job, and the whole thing began to fall apart. It just couldn't work anymore, and everybody was frustrated. Well, I love that exercise because we were just trying to say there's a cost to being extraordinary, or at least there can be. Being ordinary, being ordinarily the person God created you to be is already wonderful. And of course, you're here to, expand your skill set, create the possibility of careers that this education is going to support. But you don't need to do that at the expense of your own sense of goodness and worth. You don't have to impress anybody. You can just be you. St. Catherine of Siena, I'm sure I'll misquote her, but there's something that she said that's something like, if we all understood who and what we are as God created us to be, we would set the world on fire. That is, we don't need to stretch outside of ourselves to do that. We can just go within ourselves and find the resources that God has built into us and let those shine. Well, that's what Lupe is doing now in her afterlife story. As you know, when we do any of these crossings and we feel like this is one that we'd like to be able to share with the public, we don't do that without going back to that person and asking their permission. When we did, we got a little follow-up and we learned that she was progressing quite well and that the main thing that she needed to learn was that she was already good enough. She didn't need to acquire status or uh, be compared favorably to others. She was already all she needed to be. And then she could relax into that. And then she shone from the inside. And it wasn't with a glare, it was with a glow. You know? Kind of the difference between trying to stare at the sun or gaze at the moon. The moon's easier to look at. The sun will blind you. And if we just let our light shine, it'll be more lunar than solar because it's the reflective light of the creator who created us to begin with. That's what I believe. God's light is reflected and even refracted like it would be through a crystal. Each one of us is multifaceted, and we receive the light of Christ, the light of the Creator, and then it will play out in different ways that are lovely because we let it move through us. But we don't have to defeat anyone or to uh, feel like someone has to be our rival for me or you to do that. So anyway, that's the main message that I have to contribute around this topic of a compassionate response to Lupe. She's become a friend in my afterlife prayer life, and she could be for you if you would like that. I'm happy that she's got learned that lesson and won't have to relearn it. I'm quite confident that she can go on about her ongoing life and be a blessing to other people without feeling the need for awards or acclaim or anyone's attention. I think she knows that she's sufficient unto herself because she was created that way from the beginning. Well, that's it for this episode of the Joyful Friar podcast. If you choose to join us next week, we'll finish this story of Lupe with what we call a spiritual practice. What are some spiritual practices that her story might evoke that we could benefit by? That'll be next time's topic. Remember that I pray for you all the time. When I do, I choose to pray for your joy, and it's specifically for anything that might be robbing you of your joy. Anything that's in your mind and heart, in your story, and the way you understand your life that somehow thwarts you, holds you back, saddens you. I pray that, especially when you go to sleep, that the Holy Spirit, who is with you always, might go to the place where there is the root of some sadness or some falsehood and be able to bring healing to that place so that you might, relax and enjoy the life that you're living. If you do that, you'll be a blessing not only to yourself, but everybody around you. So that's it for now. Again, I'm Father Nathan Castle, thanking you for being with me this time and hoping that you'll be with me for the next episode of the Joyful Friar podcast. God bless you. Bye-bye.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of The Joyful Friar. Please like, follow, and subscribe. You can visit me at nathan-castle.com. Send me a message by clicking the contact button. God bless. Have you ever had to do something so difficult that you had to deal with it in stages? Imagine dying suddenly with no forewarning, being in a car crash, a shooting, a drowning. You leave your body, but then what? How do you transition into the afterlife? For some, it flows all at once, but not for everybody. For some, the process of transitioning into the afterlife is interrupted. Maybe there's a need for rest or for learning, or maybe just the chance to adjust to such an abrupt experience. I'm Father Nathan Castle. I'm a Catholic priest. About 23 years ago, the Holy Spirit began to send me people who had died traumatically. They entered my dreams during sleep, showing me what had happened to them and asking for help. They had died and moved on, sort of, but they'd come to a moment where it was time to complete the crossing. With the help of the angels and saints and earthly prayer partners, we've assisted more than 300 souls as they complete their crossing. You can read about it in my book series. Afterlife Interrupted books are available on Amazon. You can also learn more by visiting my website, nathan-castle.com. God bless you.